So I am back in the United States after living 3 years in Latin America. Specifically, I was in countries such as Mexico, Guatemala, Colombia, Peru, Paraguay, Argentina, and after just a few weeks of being back, I see my home country in a completely different way. So in this video, I'm gonna break down exactly how the US looks to me now. I'll share the good, the bad, and why, as a man over 35, I believe that the highest quality of life is no longer in the United States, but outside of it, and for me, specifically in Latin America. By the way, if you're new here, my name's Alex. On this channel, I share everything that I've learned about leaving the United States and living a much higher quality of life in Latin America as a man over 35. So if that sounds interesting to you, be sure to subscribe. Let's get into the video. All right, so let's start with women and dating culture. So for the first 30 years of my life, I only dated, for the most part, American women. All right. Why is that? I'd say because in schools, like in middle school, high school, the most attractive women in my school were typically the American ones, right? The white girls. And I'm attracted to American women. I'm not the guy here that bashes American women at all. All right. I'm just kind of giving you my perspective and a little bit of context. So women in the US, in my opinion, are highly intelligent. They make for very interesting conversations. Like whenever I come back here, there is someone that I see, and we always have really good conversations, really good debates. I thoroughly enjoy them, right? We have great debates, great discussions, but the culture here is highly individualistic, and it's heavily influenced by feminism, obviously, right? So therefore, traditional family-oriented women are definitely more rare to come by versus in Latin America, all right? Most women here are career-focused, because I'd say it's just really the culture. I don't blame women for being the way they are. It's just how the culture has influenced them, right? Feminism, all that stuff. So they're more career focused, and because of social media and dating apps, they're also constantly flooded with male attention. So I feel like the value that they feel like they bring to the table is, it might be a little bit more inflated than what it really is, if we're being honest. So to stand out as a man, you need to be in the top 1 or 5% of men in terms of looks, income, status, just to get what would be considered average in Latin America. All right. Just been my experience. Now, in Latin America, the dynamic flips. Okay. Women are more traditional. They are more feminine. They generally value masculine men who lead. Right. This is part of their culture. It's specifically, let's talk more South America, because even if you go to Mexico, I'd say parts of Central America is a little more like kind of more mixed. It leans more towards South America. But definitely places in Mexico is a little more, you'll get like that career oriented versus family oriented. So I'd say let's talk South America. They value having a family over a career. And that's why I say for the most part. I was just kind of talking about more of the region. As a foreigner, you already stand out, right? Because you're someone who is traveling from a different country. Hopefully you speak Spanish, right? Hopefully you have some interesting stories you can tell. You're already earning USD most likely. So this gives you a huge advantage. So from my experience, in terms of women and dating culture, I don't say anything bad about the States, but if I have a preference, being I lean more masculine, right? I want more feminine vibes. You're going to get that more in South America than US all day long, of course, obviously. All right, now let's talk brotherhood and male networks. So I love my friends here. I've already met with a few friends, played some flag football together, worked out together, went out together. Like, I love my friends here. The problem is most of my friends are married with children. All right. I'm 37 years old. A lot of my friends I went to high school with, I played sports with, right? Played football with. And typically guys, once they reach their mid to late 30s in the US, they usually have, family, children, a lot more responsibilities. It's a lot harder to hang out as often. But me being a single guy with no kids, it's a little tougher to find like-minded guys like myself, guys who see themselves as still young. Like, even being 37, like I'm just entering my prime right now, right? I don't see myself having a family or children until my 40s. I feel like a man in his 40s, that's prime man, right? And not a lot of guys think like that. All I'm saying is it's a little tougher to find a like-minded guy like myself here in the US, in Boston specifically, where I'm at. Another thing, most guys here, I mean, there's really no shortage of ambitious men, of course, in the US. We probably have the most ambitious men on the planet, perhaps, right? But a lot of them are locked into grind culture, right? Working 50, 60 hours a week. And there's nothing wrong with that. I went through that phase, and I'm still kind of going through that phase as well. But it's tough to find true brotherhood when you don't really have time or energy for each other, right? The culture is more lone wolf. It's more really trying to like become millionaires, because you have to be a millionaire to even be considered like middle class, right? If you're making even $10,000 a month, that's not as much as it used to be, right? So I understand the grind culture here. It's a necessity. If you want to live a high quality of life in this country, you have to grind. The problem with that, it's tough to find true brotherhood as a man in his late 30s, or let's just say as a man over 35, right? When you're in that position, when you have really no children, and you're single technically, right? But being abroad is different. Okay, in Latin America, there's a growing community of remote workers, online entrepreneurs, and digital nomads. And because you stand out as a foreigner, because you're coming from a different country into a new country, you're living intentionally, you're also growing, right? You're also an online business owner, maybe you're in sales. It's a lot easier to connect with these guys, all right? Men abroad, they're actively looking for like-minded people. So the bonds tend to be even tighter. Some of the guys I met in Latin America, we're going to be friends for life, right? Where we think very similar. We share a lot more of the same values, right? We already have a lot in common. We know what it's like to leave the comfort zone of our hometowns or our home cities or our home states or our home countries. And we know what it's like to build a life elsewhere. So for those reasons, it's a lot easier to have a brotherhood and male network when you're abroad than when you're in the US for someone like myself who is in that position that I mentioned. All right, another aspect is the transportation and lifestyle differences. So one of the biggest changes I noticed right away is how much the US is built around cars or vehicles, right? For the past 3 years in Latin America, I'm so familiar with just living in the best part of the city where you don't need a car. Everything is walking distance. Everything is within 5-10 minutes walk, maybe 15-minute max. I'm talking malls, grocery stores, cafes, restaurants, bars, anything that you need is going to be walking distance. Versus here in the US, everything is pretty much spread out, right? You literally need a car for everything, which means more expenses, right? Car payments, car insurance, gasoline, occasional parking ticket in Boston, Massachusetts, and less activity in terms of walking and being more active. And for me personally, I definitely prefer to be walking, and whenever I need to leave my zone, just taking an Uber and being driven everywhere without having to worry about parking or traffic or anything like that. So those are two big differences in terms of culture, is the actual transportation and needing a car versus not needing a car. All right, now let's talk food quality. So Latin America really spoils you with all the fresh fruits, all the fresh vegetables, all the fresh ripe avocados that you need. Here in the US, I find that it's difficult to find a ripe avocado. And when you do find one, it's going to cost you maybe $2 or $2.50. Versus in most places in Latin America, there's usually an avocado person who is literally walking down the streets with new fresh avocados, selling them for like 50 cents. Everything's just so abundant and so fresh and so much more flavor. The produce in the States often sits in cold storage, so it lacks the freshness and the flavor that I'm used to getting abroad, okay? That's talking mostly, fruits and vegetables, which is obviously very important, but also the meat, guys, the meat. In Paraguay, Argentina, you get the best quality meat, really, I think, in the world, all right? So when you're familiar with that and you're used to going to a really nice restaurant, paying maybe $30 a person for like the best steakhouse in that city, here in the United States, once you have that difference, it's really no comparison compared to the quality of the meat and the value that you get for it. All right, now healthcare is also a big one. All right, in the US, when I was self-employed, well, I've always been self-employed since the age of 19, but I was paying over $400 a month for health insurance that I didn't even really use. I just needed it for emergencies, for annual checkups, which whenever I went to the doctors, it was keep doing what you're doing, kid, right? Basically just send me on my way. I still had to pay co-pays, long waits. I couldn't schedule something right away. I had to book it like weeks or months in advance. In Latin America, I pay a little over $50 a month for nomad insurance, which covers my emergencies up to $250,000, right? Which I haven't had to use yet. Knock on wood, I won't have to use that. And whenever I need a routine checkup, like just like a routine physical or get blood work done, I simply walk into a clinic. I pay well under $80, usually $50 is what I pay. And I walk out with the results typically the same day. Doctors I found are just as competent, sometimes even more attentive. And the overall process I found is a lot more affordable and efficient. Well, my first time in Latin America was in Medellin. I actually got shingles, which I thought was, pretty serious at the time. I'm 37, so I don't know why I had shingles, but I got it. And I was a little nervous because it was my first time going to a hospital in Latin America. And the experience was great. I simply went to the hospital, and they basically attended me right then and there. I paid, I think, $50 for the entire experience. The doctor gave me some medication. She diagnosed me. She said it was shingles. She gave me some medication. Within 2 weeks, it was gone for like $50 or whatever it was. It was definitely less than $100. Okay. I've been to the doctors in Mexico and Paraguay. I have nothing but good experiences with the healthcare system in these countries. And if I wanted to, which I might consider in the near future, I could get private insurance for like less than $100 a month if I really wanted it. But typically I don't really need it at this stage, in my opinion. What I do, again, I just have emergency health insurance in case something happened. I'm covered for like hospital bills and all that. And whenever I want to go, like an annual checkup, maybe I want to get some blood work, right? Testosterone testing, STD testing. You can just go that same day and get the results the same day for like $50. So I don't see the need for private health insurance at this stage in my life. All right, now let's talk work-life balance. So in the US, working 50 to 60 hours a week is normal. For reasons I mentioned earlier, I was in this category. I technically still am. I mean, just because I do remote sales, plus I have this YouTube channel, plus I work on other projects. So I enjoy working. I feel like at this stage in my life, now's the time for me to really be a workhorse, right? But this is considered like 50, 60 hours a week is pretty much the norm, right? In the US for less ambitious people, because it's a necessity, right? In order to keep up with the bills, even just 4 to 5K per month, that's just getting by, guys. So a lot of people have to work 50, 60 hours weeks, even in jobs that they don't like. And this was actually me for a decade, right? I was in real estate. I rented apartments. I managed some apartments. And really, for me to be able to keep up with my bills and try to get ahead, I had to work at least 50, 60-hour weeks in a job that I didn't even like. And I know this is probably the case for the majority of people in the US, right? Abroad, the culture is very different, right? People actually work to live. They don't live to work. And as I mentioned, even though right now I am grinding hard on my projects, I do it by choice. I do it because now is the time for me to actually build the income streams that I want so that my 40s and my 50s and the rest of my life really become the best years of my life and the ones I can enjoy the most. So I don't do it because I'm stuck in the rat race like I did in the States. And really that freedom is priceless. All right, now homelessness. Homelessness is something that I actually see more here in the US than I do in Latin America. I also noticed that more people, even people who are working, they can't afford their own apartments. So, and I guess they can't even afford to like room share with someone. So a lot of people are living in storage units here in the US, or they're living in their cars. That's only a thing here, like where we have a huge population living in actual storage units and in their own cars. So to me, that's homelessness. I'm not even talking about, all the fentanyl, the heroin, right? All that crisis where you see, druggies basically on the streets. So that's another different thing. But when you add all that stuff in, guys, homelessness in the US is a lot more prevalent and more visible than in Latin America, in my opinion. All right. In Latin America, most of the cities that I've lived in, you just don't see it as much. Probably because I'm not living in zones where, you're going to see that. Or also, if you're living in a very tourist city, like could be a Medellin or Cartagena, you'll probably see more of that because they come into those areas expecting, someone to give them handouts, which is usually the case if you're in a tourist city, right? But when you're in a non-tourist city that's still a nice city in Latin America, homelessness is not going to be a thing you're going to see much of, okay? You're not going to be in the zones where that probably does happen. I just haven't seen it. And specifically in the cities, I'll give you some cities like Asunción, Paraguay, Bucaramanga, Colombia, even Lima, Peru. Lima, Peru is a major city, but you don't see much homelessness in Lima, Peru, ironically enough, which is pretty freaking awesome. Guadalajara, didn't really see much homeless. I can go on for days. Guatemala City, in Zona 10 or Zona 4, I didn't really see much homelessness either. So I can go on and on about this. But again, this is more of a thing in the US. Similar to also school shootings, guys. This isn't on the list, but school shootings. There was one that happened literally this week. We're towards the end of August right now. And a school shooting, like that shit happens every month, it seems like. That only happens in the States, guys, not in Latin America, really nowhere else in the world from what I've seen. So that's another difference that I found. All right, last category, the most obvious, guys, is the cost of living and the money, right? US feels like the system is designed to extract wealth from you, not to help you keep it. When you factor in taxes being high, insurance, healthcare, inflation, even so-called affordable cities, you're still looking at about $2,000 to $3,000 a month just to get by with food and rent. When you add in the healthcare, the car payments, the taxes, suddenly 4 to 5K per month is just really getting by. You're not thriving. I can go into details here in terms of like what coffees go for now compared to what they used to be just last year even. I won't do that. I'll give you an example as far as eating out though. Eating out, like just taking my parents out to a normal breakfast for the three of us, it's $85, which is about $30 per person. which is the price of a fine dining experience at one of the best restaurants in major cities in Latin America. Uber ride from the airport, $80 just one way for a 35 to 40-minute drive, versus flights domestically inside Colombia, for example, $50 one way domestically. So you're paying less for domestic flights, which could take you maybe an hour and a half, 2-hour flight. You're paying less for that than a 35, 40-minute Uber ride in the States from the airport. Just think about that. And to wrap this section up, so when you're in Latin America, specifically when you're in South America, guys, places like Colombia, Paraguay, Peru, I'd say that $1,500 a month is good enough to get by. $2,500 a month, you're actually living a higher end lifestyle where you're living in a modern apartment, best part of the city, close to everything, 5 to 10 minute walking distance, gyms, cafes, restaurants, grocery stores, everything for $2,500 a month. You're living like a king in most Latin American cities. All right, now not everything in the US is negative, so let's cover some positives. There are some things that America does very well, of course, right? Number one is infrastructure, right? Highways, tunnels, bridges, these things are world class. Growing up in Boston, you really take that for granted, right? We literally built tunnels underneath oceans. I mean, that's something that you really take for granted. You don't see that in places like Paraguay or Colombia, right? The engineering here is really impressive. And I got to give credit where credit's due. Efficiency. Efficiency. Service is very fast there. I mentioned, maybe I didn't mention the coffees, but even just getting something from like a drive-through, like could be a coffee, could be whatever. Here in Boston, we like our roast beef sandwiches or like our seafood. Super efficient, super quick, right? I can't say enough good things about the speed and the efficiency of everything here. Versus in Latin America, you can expect to wait for things, right? That's one of the cons as far as being in a society where, they don't live to work, they work to live. There are pros and cons to that. Of course, I think it's still worth it, right? To be in more of in a relaxed and a chill culture, but things do take a little longer. So that takes a little bit of adjusting if you're coming from a fast-paced society, such as the US or where I'm specifically from in the Northeast. Technology and convenience. Guys, I've ordered some stuff in Amazon, right? Amazon is amazing. It tells you it's coming in 2 days. It actually comes the same day sometimes. I can't say enough good things about delivery service and Amazon same-day delivery. Affordable electronics. We get the best electronics here for affordable prices. I pay twice as much for electronics in a place like Paraguay, really anywhere South America. I think I lost my, it was my Kindle. I lost my Kindle on a flight from Buenos Aires, Argentina to Asunción. I left it on the plane like a dummy. And I was looking everywhere for a Kindle, right? And I finally found one. And then when I found it, it was twice as much of what I would have spent. Basically, I paid a couple $100s for a Kindle that would cost me less than $100 in the States. So if you're in the States, appreciate the speed of delivery for items, appreciate the affordable, best electronics in the world, right? So this stuff is really a major plus here being in the US. And then lastly is language, right? It's nice to be back where everyone speaks your native language of English, right? Ordering, asking questions, handling day-to-day tasks. It just takes less brain power. It's a lot more effortless. Even though I do speak good Spanish, yo hablo muy bien español, even though I just studied there. It still takes a little more brain power, right? When you're living in a culture that's more of your second language versus your first. So it is nice to be around people and around society where they speak your main language. It just makes things a lot easier. So after 3 years being abroad, that's how I see the United States now. Things are still pretty decent here, but for me, the highest quality of life is definitely going to be outside the States and specifically in Latin America. And if you're curious about making the move to Latin America, or maybe you want to take an exploratory trip, you want to ask someone some questions, I offer one-on-one consultations. You can find the link below. Or if you just want to watch more similar videos to this one, then click that right there and I'll see you there.